Question Time travels all over the UK, and tonight we've come to the Lancashire coast, to the town of Fleetwood, just up the road from Blackpool. And this place is a snapshot of the changing face of politics. Fleetwood has a Labour MP, while the Conservatives run the local borough council, and the wider Lancashire County Council is now controlled by Reform UK. And our audience members arriving here this evening, as with every other week, reflect that wide range of political views and voting record across the country. And tonight they're asking, with the billions being spent by the government, will we have to pay more in tax? Reform UK, could they really run the country? Welcome to Question Time from Fleetwood. One of the busiest people in the government of late is Darren Jones. As Chief Secretary of the Treasury, he's number 2 to the Chancellor, and for weeks has been negotiating, to put it politely, with Cabinet colleagues on who got what from yesterday's spending announcement. Simon Clarke was also the Chief Secretary to the Treasury once in Boris Johnson's Conservative government. He then served in the Cabinet of Liz Truss before losing his parliamentary seat last year. He now chairs the centre-right think tank Onward. Sarah Olney is one of the 72 Liberal Democrat MPs at Westminster. She speaks for the party on business and cabinet office matters. The former bookseller and accountant is MP for the London constituency of Richmond Park. And this time last week, Yusuf quit his job as chairman of Reform UK, saying that trying to get a Reform government elected wasn't a good use of his time. Now it is. 2 days later, he's back, and he's here with a new job, leading his party's so-called Doge unit, designed to cut out waste in reform-controlled councils. Welcome to our panellists, welcome to our audience here in Fleetwood. Lovely to see you, and of course, welcome to you at home. Sit back and enjoy the programme. Think about what questions you might ask if you're here in the audience, or who knows, you could join in the conversation on social media. Right, we'll get started with our first question, which is from Tom Archer-Madden.
With the planned increases in government spending announced yesterday, are tax rises now inevitable?
So the government's promised to spend billions on all sorts of things, infrastructure spending, on the NHS, for example. There will be cuts as well. But this is now where the conversations are going. Are tax rises now inevitable? If anyone knows, it should be you, Darren. Is that what we're going to be facing?
So, look, the spending review yesterday was dishing out the budget that the Chancellor put together at the budget last autumn. So you'll remember the government made some decisions on some tax changes, employer national insurance contributions, non-dom tax status changing, VAT on private schools changing, and also updated the definition of government debt so that we could unlock some investment. This spending review is about allocating that money to all of our public services across security, the NHS, our schools, and then our approach to trying to make people better off and create great jobs in every part of the country with improving wages. So it's fully funded and fully costed on the basis of the budget last year. The debate, though, is already moving on to the next budget that will come in the autumn. And the way that we work in the Treasury in this country is that we make those decisions on the basis of forecasts of the economy from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility. They have to produce a forecast twice a year by law, and that gives you the kind of official view about what we think, the best view we can take about what's going to happen in the economy, and then the Chancellor makes decisions in that context. The next ABR forecast will be coming after the summer, with a budget in the autumn, and it will be at that stage that the Chancellor will take decisions on any tax changes one way or the other later this year.
But some decisions have been taken already on tax. So, obviously, in terms of income tax, you're right. But when it comes to council tax, for example, the spending plans are predicated on the basis that all councils will increase spending every year, or charging people for council tax every year, an increase of 5%. So, that's an increase in tax.
It is a tax change. Council tax is decided by councils, not by the government in Westminster.
But it's partly decided on how much they get from the government. They don't get enough from the government, they stick up council tax. So
sure.
It's a bit disingenuous to say it's all down to the councils.
No. I'm just saying that's the decision is taken locally, and in different parts of the country, different councils take different decisions, ranging from normally around 2% to up to 5%, which is the cap they're allowed to go up to. The assumptions that we made in the spending review this week is based on the evidence of how councils have behaved recently, and assuming they will take similar decisions in the future. And the reason that's important is because it is a source of income for councils, which we top up centrally. We've put billions of extra pounds of money into councils, but we assume they're going to raise their own income locally. And also part of that goes towards our police and fire services. So in a spending review, you have to make an assumption about that in order to think about the total amount of money going to those public services. And that's what was in the spending review yesterday.
Simon, are tax rises now inevitable?
A short answer, yes. And that's not my opinion. It's that of Deutsche Bank, who forecast that probably we're talking about 10 billion of tax rises this autumn. It's the opinion of the Chartered Institute of Chartered Accountants. It is a sad reality that the government has increased borrowing by 200 billion relative to where the last Conservative budget left off. That includes 80 billion approximately of debt interest over the course of this Parliament. And you can't, I'm afraid, get away from the reality that that has to be paid for. And the weakness of the economy, and we saw today that the economy shrank by 0.3% last month. The fundamental need to stick within the ABR guidelines, which exist, means that I think it is absolutely inevitable the Chancellor will be coming back. And I think, sadly, we've already seen that this government can't stick to its promises. So Rachel Reeves last autumn at the CBI, she used her speech to say there'll be no more borrowing and no more taxes. Well, we've already got more borrowing and we're about to get more taxes. And this is a doom loop for the British economy. We cannot keep living beyond our means. And at some point, sadly, the markets will call time on that.
Lots of hands up. Let me try and get round some of you. The man in the glass and the white shirt.
Yeah, is this just another Labour's broken promise because they're running scared from reform?
In what in particular is a broken promise?
Well, because they were saying there's a 22 billion black hole and now suddenly it's gone away, but their economy hasn't actually expanded. People are still in a financial living crisis. I'm finding that the same. I've had my PIP allowance cut. Yeah. My wife's a nurse and she's getting a disgusting pay rise, right? And so I think Labour's just trying to make up lost ground, and I just don't trust the Labour Party to keep to this spending promise and no taxes.
OK, I'll put that back to you. One here in the green dress.
For the moment, then, I'd like to know what you would do differently as a Conservative Party, because you're saying that you wouldn't raise taxes, and you're very good at saying, oh, you know, in time we will give policies, and it's easier as the opposition party to say, oh, well, they're going to come back and they're going to do this. However, particularly as you were part of Liz Truss's government, I'd be really interested to know how you would do things differently.
Briefly, Simon,
the big mistake that Liz made was not to show how tax cuts would be paid for. That was the fundamental error at the heart of the mini-budget. And in some ways, of course, that's the comparison we're seeing here today, right?
Was that obvious to you at the time, as in Cabinet there, or you thinking, yeah, go Liz?
I think as the summer went on, the summer of 2022, it became... I wasn't a Treasury Minister by the autumn of 22, but it had become clear that the impetus was endless towards more radicalism, you know, going for growth more and more aggressively, and that was clearly attention. I was the Secretary of State for levelling up, and we were designing enterprise zones to try and grow the economy. And it had gone from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 50 to why have any limit at all? And you could feel that tension. On the very specific question about what we would do differently, the answer has to be spending control, and that is a difficult thing to say.
So making cuts?
Yes, absolutely. It is about bringing a welfare budget in particular back down under control. So the United Kingdom at the moment spends somewhere north of £300 billion on welfare. We are going to have to, as a country, bring that down. Well, realistically, at some point, we have to answer the question about whether we're living within our means, and we are not as a country. Right. And that is what we need to do differently. Let
me hear a bit more from our audience, because there's lots of hands up. Yes, the man here in the front in the dark blue top.
Do we think on the panel that by saving money, housing illegal immigrants in hotels and moving them around the country, perhaps we could put that into the economy, and that would help us much more than increasing taxes on people that are already hurting?
OK, we are going to come back to that point, so let's hold that thought. Man in the glass.
I think the government is playing boomerang with our money. They gave some money yesterday and then be claiming it back through taxes. Investment, what they should be thinking about.
All right. And the man in the blue check shirt with a... There's 2 check shirts in a row. It's going to be a bit tricky here. Let's hear from both of you. So the man slightly further forward, yes, with the glasses. Yeah, you.
Yes. Why do I get the feeling that this budget, just like any other, is a continuation, slight modifications? It's all about neoliberalism. It's all about austerity for the masses, cutting government services to the core, funneling money into private industry. When are we going to decide that neoliberalism is dead and we need an alternative way of doing things?
All right, the man behind you.
If the government's so short of money, perhaps the panel will be interested to know that we import over £100 billion of oil and gas every year, when there's plenty of oil and gas in the North Sea.
OK. Yep. Sarah. So the question is, are tax rises now inevitable?
I don't think so. But, I mean, I would say it's all very well for Simon to sort of sit there and look terribly sorrowful about the necessity of tax rises. But he mentions the cost of borrowing. The cost of borrowing shot up under Liz Truss as a direct result of her budget that you were in the government for, and it hasn't reduced since then. And that is one of the massive.
It's higher.
That's one of them. But that was when it first started going up as a direct result of the Truss budget. We are still living with the consequences of the Conservatives' dire economic mismanagement, and that is part of the reason that we find ourselves in the situation that we're in now. But what I would say is I don't think tax rises are inevitable. I think there are other choices that Rachel Reeves can make. And the Liberal Democrats, we've set these out very clearly. One of the things that we are always talking about is moving closer to Europe, building our trading relationship with Europe. We want to see a bespoke UK-EU customs union. Now, independent research shows that could add 2.2% to our GDP, which could result in a tax take of £25 billion a year. Now, if we were serious about growth and pursuing growth, then that is the sort of thing that we would be looking at.
Somehow I think you won't agree with that, Zia.
Well, look, I would like to go back to Tom's question at the beginning as to whether tax rises are inevitable. Mark my words, they absolutely are. Labour and the Tories are pretty much exactly the same. Labour would just do what the Tories do a little bit faster. People in this country are struggling. They're struggling. They're seeing the cost of their weekly shop go up every time they seem to go to the supermarket. Rents seem to go up all of the time. If you have a mortgage, you know, the borrowing costs under Labour are higher than they were even under the disaster of Liz Truss. And let's not even get started about energy costs, the energy bills. People are petrified to open their energy bill because of the ridiculous net zero policies. British people suffer the most expensive energy bills in the world. People are struggling. And I will say this too. British people throughout history have been willing to take pain, willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. But as the gentleman in the front row said, how can you look British people in the eyes and say, make the sacrifices, when there's infinite money, apparently, for citizens of foreign countries, whether it's people coming across in small boats, asylum hotels at $5 billion a year, $15 billion a year in foreign aid, or the Chagos Islands, to cede sovereign territory and then rent it back at the cost of $30 billion. And by the way, what that's funded... That has funded Mauritians. 80% of Mauritian workers are exempt from tax, while the tax burden on British people is at the highest level since World War II. There's nothing at all about it that's remotely acceptable. We've got to prioritise citizens of the United Kingdom. That's what reform will do.
Since you mentioned Liz Truss, she did do one thing right. After 40-odd days in a job, she's now on a pension of £140,000 a year for the rest of her life. But that's not the question, is it? I'd like to know why Labour aren't going after Apple, Boots, that the guy in the corner shop's paying his fair share of tax, and yet Apple's got 6 people in Dublin, and that's the headquarters for the UK. It's a farce. Why aren't you going after them?
Darren?
We are. We're putting a record amount of money into HMRC to tackle tax avoidance and tax evasion and fraud. We're upgrading their IT systems to be able to catch these schemes earlier on, and we're projected to increase tax take as a consequence.
Hiding in plain sight. They're there and they're not paying the taxes. That's a fact. And now Trump's in power. If you go after Apple, you know what Trump's going to do, don't you?
Sure, I take the point, but all I'm saying is that for our tax collection system in HMRC, we're putting record levels of funding into the tax system to be able to
Why are they paying less than the corner shop?
That back. Well, the question on Apple is around global taxation systems. We have a digital services tax in the UK, so that where companies make profits in the UK, they pay taxes in the UK as they should. Obviously, what we can't do is claw back tax that's residing in other countries. But in the UK, we're definitely going after that and increasing the amount of tax coming into the system by tackling fraud and avoidance. But look, I just want to tackle this issue about Labour being the same as the Tories, because I find it personally offensive. I mean, we've increased the national minimum wage. We're building a new generation of council houses. We've extended free school meals to every kid in school that's on universal credit. We're paying our doctors and nurses the salaries they've been looking for years as a consequence of our investment. We've increased spending on doctors and nurses for the last 2 years when the Tories wouldn't even talk to doctors and nurses, which is why they were on strike. The thing that is the same is when Reform and the Conservatives give you the simple answers to complex promises, but do not tell you how they're going to do it. Those are the questions you should be answering.
Can I just respond to that? I'll tell you what's offensive is insulting the intelligence of the British people.
I didn't. I insulted your intelligence. Answer the question.
You're entitled to insult my intelligence. You're not entitled to insult the intelligence of British people.
How?
Earlier on,
How?
you described an obvious tax hike in the form of council tax increases of 5%.
There's no answer.
Council tax increases of 5%. You described it, and I'm quoting, as a, quote, tax change. Apparently it's a tax change. The British people are sick and tired of being gaslit, and the Prime Minister of this country does it. You can see it on his social media account all of the time. You are unwilling to be honest with the British people. You consistently prioritise foreign citizens over the citizens of this country. And it's time you owned up to that and you stood by your conviction.
You did not answer the question how you do anything you've promised. I say what the British people are sick of, and that's false promises. That's why they voted for change at the election last year.
Well, look, we are going to come to that later, so feel free to hold your fire on that, because you will get your chance. Now, there are quite a few people shouting out rubbish back there, but I think, yes, you were with your hand up.
Yeah, so I am a nurse, OK, and I don't think with the spending review it's a problem allocating the money to these places like the NHS. I think the problem lies in the people who are running those hospital trusts, because the one in Blackpool, he spent all the money. There's 3 staff nurse jobs in the whole of the hospital at this moment in time. When I first started there, back in 2011, there was 20, 30, 40 jobs. And if a nurse got tired of the area where she was working and wanted to learn more, you could move. Right now, it's stalemate, because there's absolutely no money, there's no resources, and there's no staff. So if nurses are getting a low morale, apart from having low wages, and that 3.6% is nowhere near enough, then that is the reason why. You can do your spending review and you can allocate the money, but the people in charge of these hospitals need to be held accountable for their actions.
Yes.
Thank you. You spoke about growth, and you've all got a consensus on growth being really important in our economy. And you spoke about decreases in the welfare. Yet everyone's not spoke about skills and the importance of skills in that growth, and no one's talked about investment in colleges, which is a large lever in that growth. The IMF said that college teachers are paid £7,000 less than school teachers. So what would you do differently? And that's to all of you on the panel.
And is this something that you do?
I'm on the board of governors at Blackpool and Fowle College, and I'm also passionate about skills and being a driver for young people, but also for our economy. And talking about AI, those people are going to need to be reskilled as well. So that needs investment. And that's the only real way to get that growth, is to develop that talent in this country.
I'm going to take a few more questions. I'll come back to that. Yes, man in the pink shirt here.
Thank you. I think what the British public are sick of is listening to you lot chipping away at each other and never, ever answering a question with a straight answer. Particularly you, Mr. Yusuf. So I shall give you an opportunity to do that now. We're all saying we want to make savings, we all want to make cuts, but not one party is addressing the big elephant in the room, and that elephant is immigration. I voted Labour And if we had an election tomorrow, I would still vote Labour, but they would lose, and we would be under a reform government. A government with no plans and no clue what they're doing. So what do we do to stop that? I'll give you a clue. We've got something called Border Force, and the clue's in the name. So send the Border Force boats out there. As soon as these dinghies leave French water, we turn them round, we send them back, we disembark the passengers, we take away their boats. That's how you smash the gangs, not by flying all over the world like Sir Keir Starmer. And instead of saying, let's build more homes for immigrants, let's have less immigrants for homes. One of you, please, have the guts to answer that directly and not go around, oh, we've invested this and that. We need direct action. We need it now. There's your savings.
Right. Well, let's deal with that point. Before we do, I just want to tell you where we are next week, which is in Greenford in West London. And I just want to tell you that we're doing Question Time a little bit differently, because we're going to devote the whole programme to the issue of growing up in the 21st century. So, social media, use of mobile phones, jobs, housing, mental health, that kind of thing. So we have quite the panel. Obviously have quite the panel tonight, I hasten to add, but we have quite the panel. So as well as politicians, we have Jack Thorne, who is the writer of that Netflix huge drama hit Adolescence. We have Catherine Birbalsingh, who has earned herself the sobriquet of strictest headmistress in the country. We also have someone called Tommy Innit, who, if you're over 35, you've probably not heard of. But if you're under 35, you will have, because he is a massively successful YouTuber, gamer, and now stand-up comedian with millions upon millions of followers. So that's what we're doing next week. We're looking for young people in the audience, as well as the not so young. So if you'd like to come and apply and be part of that programme devoted to that one subject, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there. It should be really, really fascinating, and hopefully I shall see you there. Right, let's deal with that issue that you have raised. Not just you. Brian Griffiths, where are you sitting? Right, let's hear your question.
Working families of Fleetwood are struggling in substandard housing and going hungry. Should asylum seekers be living in a rent-free hotel in Blackpool?
Right. Let's deal with this. Simon.
The short answer, Brian, is that they shouldn't be, and we do need to get a grip on this. And it's really important to understand, I think, some of the reasons why this is happening. The first thing to say on your point, sir, on the why can't we turn the boats round in the Channel, is that we all start from a position, I think, where we would like to see that happen. When I was in Cabinet, the advice that was given by the authorities, including the Navy, was that forced turnarounds of these dinghies, overcrowded, packed with women and children, would lead to excess death in the sea.
Hang on, let him answer. He's answering your question, let him answer.
And whilst I totally accept that obviously the gangs driving these crossings are heedless of the risk to human life, that was the position of the British authorities. What we really need to do, though, is to address the incentives that drive people here. And that means we need to have serious reform of our asylum laws, and it means we need, I think, to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which is being roundly abused, time after time, to mean that British courts are unable to get rid of people who have no earthly right to be here on any sensible basis. And we see it in all sorts of manifestations. It obviously goes wider than just the asylum seeker conversation. It goes to our inability to deport many foreign criminals. But it is simply farcical that between now and 2029, on the government's own figures this week, we'll spend somewhere in the region of £12.5 billion on asylum seeker accommodation. That is money which should be being spent in this country, or not spent at all and given back in the form of tax cuts.
I mean, that was being spent under the government when you were in government as well.
Yes.
So it's hardly a new problem. I mean, how did you let that happen?
Well, my very clear wish was that we should take very robust action on the human rights settlement, which I believe is, at the moment, being abused in a way which the founders of the treaties in the 1950s could never have imagined, to set our ability to have a safe and secure sovereign border at naught. And until we get real with that, then we're not going to resolve this problem. That's why I am very pleased Kemi Badenoch's set up the commission, which will look at how we do this, because it is an important and complex question, and we'll report back this September.
Darren, so one of the things Rachel Reeves announced yesterday, which I'm not sure anyone was expecting, was that there will be no asylum seekers being housed in hotels by 2029. How on earth are you going to do that when the number of asylum seekers coming over the Channel, which is a small number of the people, I have to say, claiming asylum overall, most of those have overstayed their visas, but that number is going up. How are you going to achieve this?
So one of the problems that we've inherited coming into government was a huge number... No, it's true. Was a huge number of people in hotels waiting for a decision. There was a backlog of people being paid to stay in hotels because the last government didn't take decisions on their asylum claims. That's why the bill is so high. So we're working through those now at pace. If you are not entitled to stay here, you have to go back where you came from. That's
Can I just ask you on that point, because that's what you've said. That's what you've said, and I'm sure that, Zia, that's what you'll say as well. But there are countries that just won't take people back.
There are
so
some...
what do you... There was quite a few. I mean, you know... I mean, for example, Robert Jenrick was quoting Iraq, Somalia, Ethiopia, Iran, I believe. They are not prepared, on the whole, there may be some exceptions, to take people back. Look, so where are they going to go?
Yeah, look, there are some of those cases and they are difficult, but it is the minority of people currently waiting, which is why we've done returns agreements with countries and why we've returned over 20,000 people who do not have the right to claim asylum here. It is right that we're cancelling the use of asylum hotels because that's not how we should be paying taxpayers' money. But on the other side of the coin, can I just say something which I'm sad to say I think is now controversial in our political debate? I did a visit to the Border Security Command in Dover a few weeks ago to see what we were doing to process these applications, to return people that are not allowed to be here, to make sure that you're catching people trying to come in when they shouldn't come in. But let me tell you, when you're there on the site, seeing these dinghies put together by these organised criminal gangs, which are clearly not safe, and when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not.
No, you have got to take... No, look, I get this is...
North of 90% of them are adult men.
Let me be... No, that's not true.
Hang on, you're saying that's not true?
No, look, this is why it's controversial. I'm saying it's not true. Now, and I'm saying that this is controversial for a reason, and it's not... You're told not to challenge the audience on question time, but I'm going to, so let me tell you this story. When there are babies and children put into that position by human trafficking gangs who are coming across in the Channel with skin burns from the oil from those boats mixing with the salt seawater, I would ask any of you to look at those babies and children and say, go back where you came from. It is right that we are there to help them. It is right that we are a country that respects our human rights obligations, but it is also right that we should have a border that is functioning and an immigration system that is functioning. It was left out of control by the last government.
You know they're coming from France.
And we're going to go...
You know they're coming from France.
We're going to take control of it again. It's right that we take a humanitarian response for those people who are put in those positions, and as the government's policy states, dealing with the criminal gangs who are exploiting vulnerable children to use that route, and then tackling the people who should not be using it and making sure that they're not staying in this country. You can do both of those things without politicising it in the way that you do.
Zia.
Well, in my previous answer, I made the case that this government prioritises foreign citizens over citizens of the United Kingdom. After that testimony, I can rest my case.
How do you rest that case?
So number one, well, you were just talking about. So number one, the vast majority of the people making the journey from France by small boat are fighting-age, military-age males, not women and children. That's the first point. And I don't know if the BBC real-time fact-checkers are working this evening or not. They seem to be when I speak, but let's see. That's the first point. The second point I would make is that, you know, we're talking about asylum hotels and Rachel Reeves saying we're going to shut down asylum hotels. There was a report today that this Labour government is not only renting hotel spaces, they're actually going to buy hotels at the taxpayers' dime. Can you just categorically deny that that is the case, that this government, this Labour government, is spending taxpayers' money purchasing hotels in order to house illegal immigrants and asylum seekers?
We own government...
Well, yes,
I'm answering your question. We own government-owned temporary accommodation for when people are waiting for a decision. That is true, but...
So you're not buying any more?
Well, we've had to buy some to get out of hotels, but it's temporary accommodation. It's cheaper to do it that way. But look, when you say that this means that the government is prioritising foreigners over the British people, you have to explain what you mean by that.
OK, let me explain what I mean.
True.
I spent many weeks in the constituency of Runcorn and Helsby. Runcorn is a very deprived area. And do you know the issue that exercised people so much and why you lost that seat with them? massive swing to Sarah poaching. The reason is primarily because of HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. So not the actual hotels. In an unholy alliance of Serco and Yvette Cooper, the Labour Home Secretary, illegal migrants are being deposited into communities where there's no say for the local people about it, people from alien cultures. There's a lot of crime as a result of this. And what takes this to Bond villain levels of wickedry, there are Section 21 eviction notices being given to British tenants, including, and in my inbox I have examples of veterans, including one who is suffering PTSD, who received a Section 21 eviction notice because Serco, at the behest of the Home Office, at the behest of Keir Starmer, is offering 5 to 7 year contracts, 20 to 30% above market rates, to house illegal migrants and asylum seekers. And as a result of that, British people are being turfed out onto the street. There's nothing about that that's remotely acceptable, and it's why the social contract in this country is hanging by a thread.
So, Zia, just be clear, because one of the things that your boss, Nigel Farage, has talked about is sending, if they come over on a boat, and you refer to it, Simon, if people come over in a boat, you turn it round and dump them back on the beach in France. Practically
impossible.
How would that happen? How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, number one, you might ask them what they're doing with the £400 million of British
No, I'm asking you a different question. How would you persuade the French government to accept that?
Well, I just answered you. The first thing I would say is, can we have our money back, please? That would be the first
you
point.
How would you persuade the government to accept that?
So listen, there's a number of points here to be made. Firstly, you have to take away the incentive. That I agree with. You have to leave the ECHR. That I agree with. It'll never happen under the Tories. There's a reason it never happened is because the vast majority of Tory MPs are against. Hang on.
I've asked you questions here. Please answer. How would, it's a central part of your policy, as I understand it, you turn the boats round and deposit the people back on the beach in France, and France would just have to swallow that. How would you persuade them to do that?
Well, listen, I will say this. If the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is unwilling to have an extremely difficult conversation with the leader of France about the sovereignty of our territory, which is basically being overwhelmed and overrun on a daily basis as a result of the Channel, I don't know about what the Prime Minister would be willing to have a difficult conversation.
So you don't know if you'd manage to persuade them or not. You can't be sure. Let's hear from our audience. A lot of hands up. Lots of hands up for lots of questions. This is absolutely great. Man in the shirt there, yeah.
Human rights are human rights. Shame on you all. Shame on you for ditching it. The only way to sort immigration out is for you all to get together with all other countries to sort it out at source. There's people dying all the time.
Man here.
Zia, you pretend that Reform are a party for the working people. However, just in the last 2 weeks, Farage has gone on about looking at abortions. He's pro-Israel, which a lot of the British people are not for bombing Israel. I've seen racist tweets about the new Hermione. She's 11 years old from Reform supporters. You want to get rid of the NHS. Farage is on record saying that. Not really a party for the working people. You've got magic money tree policies. How are you going to fund public services?
Now, see, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer that because we're going to look into that in more detail. Yes, with a grey fleece on, I think, or something. Yeah.
I completely understand the point about not wanting to deposit children and babies back on the beach. I don't actually know what the number that we're paying France every year. It's quite a lot, I think, in millions. But I would have thought they should be paying us for every boat that leaves their shores and arrives here.
OK. Sarah, you've been very patient. Forgive me for not coming to you earlier. So, should asylum seekers be living in a free hotel in Blackpool? And also, we've got onto the wider point about illegal immigration more generally.
Well, the reason we're in the situation that we're in is because the asylum backlog, the application for asylum, the backlog got so large under the previous Conservative government. It's still very large now. We have a lot of people in this country who are waiting a really long time for asylum decisions. I have in my constituency a hotel which has had asylum seekers in, and I've spoken to some of those people. They've reached out to me as their local MP. Some of them have been waiting over 2 years. And you know, that is simply unacceptable. And to talk about incentives, I think for some people, the thought that they could just live here for 2 years for the next 2 years of their life. Actually, if it's going to take us that long, it's not really surprising that some people might regard that as a bit of an incentive. We urgently need to get that down, the amount of time that it takes for the Home Office, for the Border Force, whoever it is, to make those decisions, and to either then enable people to stay if they have a right to be here, or to return them. Because apart from anything else, when they're stuck in those hotels, and I have spoken to some of them in my constituency, some of them have fled, unimaginable horror, but they're actually bringing with them skills, professional experience. I've been quite dismayed to find how many healthcare workers there are when we have massive shortages in our local hospital, but we don't allow them to work.
But wouldn't that be even more of an incentive if we did?
Well, my point is we need to bring down the length of time that it takes. But if it's going to take, if they're going to be here, then actually why not be making a contribution while they're here? So that's something that the Liberal Democrats are pushing for. But more than anything, as I say, we need to bring down the amount of time that it takes to process their applications. But I've got to say, let's not demean ourselves while they're here, while we are dealing with their applications as quickly as we possibly can. Can we not demean ourselves by pretending that they're aliens? These are human beings, and it is beneath us to treat them in the way that Zia is suggesting.
Let's take another question. And Zia, you'll have a chance to reply to some points that have been made. Felix August. There you are.
So, Reform UK have got 10 councils here, including here in Blackpool. But fast forward 4 years, are they going to be in Downing Street, or are they going to be in a comedy act down the road in Blackpool?
Zia.
Well, there's a lot of ad hominem attacks to respond to there. So firstly, the notion that Nigel Farage is on the record as saying that we'd scrap the NHS, simply not true. The NHS is very close to my heart. My parents have given between them over 50 years of service to the NHS. My mother is a nurse, my father is a paediatrician. My mum is over 70, she still works full-time as a nurse. And going back to the great...
But hang on a second. Nigel Farage has said that the NHS funding model, I mean, he said this last year, the NHS funding model isn't working anymore. We need to fundamentally rethink the way we fund it. Let's look at the lessons of the French healthcare system. He only said this last year, and obviously the French healthcare system is a combination of insurance-based healthcare paid by employers, some private healthcare, and then some funded by the government.
At no point has Nigel ever said we'd scrap the NHS. He's been very clear we will keep the NHS free at the point of use. But let's also be really clear. The NHS isn't working for people. Over the last 2 decades, the cost, the amount of money every person in this country is paying into the NHS has increased by 50%. And in that time, elective waiting lists have increased by 70%.
So when he says let's change the way we fund and organise the NHS, what does he mean?
Let me finish. 19,000 people waited more than 3 days in accident and emergency in 2023. That is a third world statistic. The NHS currently, sadly, as much as I love it, my parents have dedicated their lives to it, it's very close to my heart, it is not working. And the notion that we can just keep throwing money at it, as I pointed out, we have to make some fundamental changes and ask some real questions about why so many people in this country are petrified of getting ill. And then I want to just also respond to the point about, are we a party for working people? We are the only party who are saying the first tax cut Nigel Farage will make as Prime Minister with our MPs is to raise the threshold at which point income tax is payable to £20,000 a year so that people like nurses... Pardon?
How will you replace that, Ross?
Well, let me give you some examples. The £5 billion a year currently spent on asylum hotels, the £12 billion a year that you will find. With respect, please, sir. With respect, please, sir. Please let me answer the question.
But you haven't answered mine.
Sir, I'm answering the question. Please show me the respect to let me do so. £12 billion a year that you will find directly inside government budgets as a result of the net zero madness that is taking our energy costs to the highest levels in the world, and the £15 billion in foreign aid. How can you look Welsh people in the eyes and say it's OK for Welsh 15-year-olds' educational attainment in English, mathematics and science to be below the OECD average while we're sending foreign aid, meaningful foreign aid, to countries like Turkey and Vietnam that score higher than them? There's nothing about it that's remotely acceptable. And I keep going back to this point. Reform, the decisions that we will make, will be in favour of citizens of the United Kingdom. We make no apology for that.
So, look, it's the first time we've had you on since you quit Reform last week. You quit saying trying to get Reform elected government was not a good use of your time. Now it is. What's changed? Still the same party.
Look, I'm on the record being very clear. I regret that tweet, and I basically worked 11 months, Fiona, without a day off. I'm very proud of what we achieved. In the 48 hours after I sent that intemperate tweet, which I regret, I was inundated with messages, very heartfelt and quite emotional messages, actually, from people who told me how important reform was to them. And frankly, and I'm paraphrasing almost all the messages, whether people agree or not, that people see, millions of people in this country see reform as really the last hope to turn this country around. I'm extraordinarily grateful and proud, and I feel very blessed to be back to try to do that and help turn around the country I love.
But when you talk about the messages of support, I mean, obviously your boss, Nigel Farage, to whom you are close, I assume, was talking about the fact that you decided to leave. And one of the things he mentioned that might be a reason, and these are his words, not mine, that interpersonal skills are not top of your list of personal attributes. What did you make of that?
Well, look, I think I'm a very results-oriented person. I care deeply about the mission. I worked as a volunteer. I sold my company in 2023. I didn't come from money. I think the United Kingdom is one of the few countries in the world where my story is even possible. I'm extremely passionate about this mission. I've dedicated pretty much my life to it since last summer. So I make no apologies for the fact that we've been a very results-oriented organisation. And as a result of that, we've gone from 14% in the general election last summer to polling at north of 30%. We've opened 400 branches. And, of course, we took control of 10 councils. And I think May the 1st, Fiona, will go down as the most historic set of local election results in this country's history. So very proud of what we've achieved.
Right, so amongst other things, is talking about a lot of savings you're going to make, a lot of money you're going to spend. You were saying where you're going to find it. Darren?
The question on the next election. Look, the Labour Party was elected with a huge majority last year because people voted for change. And we are very focused on the fact that there is a lot of work to be done for people to feel that. We are promising to make people feel better off by the end of this Parliament, to get our public services back on their feet, and to make sure that the country is set up for success again and that people can be proud of it. But you're pointing us into the direction of the next election campaign with your question. And let me say, with my party political campaigning hat on, I'm very, very clear about what we need to do at the next election. Not only do we need to show that we have delivered meaningful change for people and that politics can do that in our democracy, but we have also got to expose the hollowness and the false promises of the populist right who promise you every single thing that you could desire without answering any single question about how they're going to do it. All of these unfunded promises, as we saw under Liz Truss when she did it with the Conservatives, it's not just a risk to the country and a risk to the economy, it is a risk to family finances, and the politics of the next election is going to be about exposing the risk of the populist right and proving once again that mainstream centre-ground politics can deliver real change for people across our country.
I think Reform's outlook on net zero is very short-term because the cost of inaction is so much higher than if you were to invest now. You could invest in renewable energy to gain energy security. You could invest in skills and green skills and give more jobs. And I just think it's incredibly naive to sort of convey the opinions that you have, and I think it's oversimplistic.
Now, look, we've got a lot of reform supporters in the audience as well, so I want to hear from some of them, at least. Here's one in the front with the glasses on and the suit, yes.
Yeah, Reform are changing what they call waste within local government, regional governments, potentially central government, if they're successful in the future. How much is actually spent on bureaucracy in this country? How many layers of chiefs do we have to have taking money with their research assistants, with their secretaries, with everything else that costs behind that? How much is going on bureaucracy?
OK, well, listen, a prize to anyone who can answer that absolutely clearly. Yes, but you obviously feel quite a lot. Man in the blue short-sleeve shirt there, yeah.
Hi, regarding some of the points that have been brought up there, especially with the net zero. 7 years ago, on this very programme, I warned about over-relying on foreign gas and the need for domestic onshore production to shield us from price shocks. Today, while we've stopped direct Russian gas imports, the UK still faces some of the highest electricity prices in the developed world, crippling businesses and households. The transition also risks deep dependence
just put your question. You don't have to read out a whole long
Chinese panels. Basically, what I'm trying to say in a nutshell
let's hear your
is
question.
there's a lot of natural gas power stations that's going to be coming offline over the next 5 years, and 8 of the 9 nuclear reactors are coming offline as well. Moving on forward from that, the dynamic pricing that's going to hit everybody in this room is horrific. And that's going to be dynamic pricing around the peak times in the morning and the evening. And it's basically the Conservatives, Lib Dems and the Labour Party who have basically signed up to this net zero contract of absolute destruction, and there will be blackouts before the end of this decade.
All right. Man here in the glasses.
Labour only got in because they didn't want the Conservatives in.
Yeah.
And Labour are lied and lied. Keir Starmer is a liar. A liar. Until we get them in, it's going to carry on everything.
Right, Darren, I'm sure you want to come back on that, but let me just come around our panel. Sarah, so the question is about reform. In 4 years, I mean, just to quote you, Felix, are they more likely to end up in Downing Street or be a comedy act up the road in Blackpool?
Well, I don't think people will be laughing if they're in number 10. But, I mean, to Zia's point, they have just won a whole clutch of councils, and I think it remains to be seen what they do with them. I'm hearing from colleagues in Kent, for example, who are the official opposition on Kent County Council now that Reform are running. You know, they're cancelling meetings left, right and centre, including the audit meeting, which is there to scrutinise expenditure, and you think your Doge team is going to come in and suddenly find all of this waste that's going on? I can't answer this gentleman's question exactly. I don't know the numbers. What I do know is that local councils right across the country have been running on very, very low budgets for over a decade now. And if there has been loads and loads and loads of waste to cut, it has been cut. And 75%, do you mind if I just finish this point, sir? 75% of what most councils spend is on children and adult social care. And they have statutory obligations that they can't, you know, they cannot cut them any further. There is very, very little waste to cut. And Reform keeps saying that there is billions of pounds to be saved and that they can cut people's council tax. Let's let them do that. Let's see what happens, and then we'll see if they deserve to be in number 10.
I agree that the councils do a wonderful job. So we've got a council. But now we've also got Lancashire County Council as well as our local council. How many layers of government do you need? You just need a local government and a central government. Why have we got all these other layers? Why have we got these mayors? Why have we got county councils? Do we need them?
Okay.
Who's running the country?
All right. Not you, Simon, but I would like you to answer the question. So we're talking about reform. You're obviously very exercised about the level of bureaucracy that you see. Are reform likely to be a credible proposition in government? That's effectively what the question is.
I mean, this is where, if you like, having lost, I can be really honest that running the country is difficult, and it is incredibly easy for Reform to sit here today and to pretend that just being angry about things will translate into running Britain either differently or better. The reality is that their economic prescription is madness, and I can say that as someone who was part of the Liz Truss government. And I can, and you know, we talk about it a lot, right? And perhaps rightly so. But the size of what Reform have in contemplation is 2 to 3 times larger than what Liz was seeking to do. And look how the markets reacted to Liz's prescription. And that is the reality of what unfunded tax cuts mean on that scale. The reality is what we heard it here this evening. They're unable to answer Fiona's question around what happens when the French say no, when you tow the boats back. The reality is they will say no. Are we going to end up in a shooting war with the French Navy when we try and enforce this? You know, when they unveiled their energy policy earlier this year on net zero, led by Richard Tice, it was a shambles. It had to be withdrawn within 24 hours of it being announced. Governing is hard, and Reform are not serious. And whilst I totally accept, and I really do, the anger that the public feel about levels of immigration. That is the primary reason why the Conservative government deservedly lost the last general election. It will not be fixed by electing a bunch of people who do not know what they're talking about and who would let you all down very badly if they were to win.
Well, once again, quite a lot to respond to there. Can I go back to the lady in the front row talking about net zero? Look, net zero, we are in favour of clean air for ourselves, for our kids and for our grandkids. You will not find a more pro-nuclear, for example, party than Reform, including small modular reactors, where we have a national champion like Rolls-Royce. The issue is we should not be subsidising it. It's a regressive tax on working people, to the tune of £300 per year over the last decade to the average household in the UK. That's why people watching this programme, the people in this audience, are petrified to open their energy bills. If you want to have solar panels on your roof on your own dime, that's cool. I like Teslas, great cars, that's fine. But you should not be taxing, in a regressive way, working people in this country in order to achieve it. And we need to cut our energy costs. I keep going back to this. We will never have proper economic growth in this country if you have the highest energy costs in the world. The US pays 60% less than us. They're growing way faster. The Chinese pay 80% less than us. They are growing way faster. Going, in terms of the Tories, I mean, somebody who sat alongside Liz Truss and inflicted that damage on this country, saying we're economic fantasists, is the ultimate of the pot, calling the kettle black. Nigel Farage is the only political leader that I can remember for a very, very long time who has ever stood up in front of the media and talked about making hundreds of millions of pounds of cuts in his first term as Prime Minister.
So other than cutting net zero subsidies, when it comes to welfare, for example, when it comes to the NHS, for example, would you be making cuts there?
Well, I'll give you 32 billion a year of cuts straight away. As I said, 15 billion in foreign aid, 5 billion.
What about the question I just
5 billion in asylum hotels, and the 12 billion on net zero. If you take something like welfare, and again, hearing a Tory talk about this, they took state spending as a percentage of GDP.
This question is about reforms here. Would you cut the welfare? Well, you haven't yet. Would you cut the welfare budget?
Look, we are on the side of working people and people who set their alarm clocks in the morning. It is way too easy in this day and age in the United Kingdom to get onto long-term welfare. And by the way, almost impossible to come off it.
Would you cut the welfare budget?
We are on the side of working people. So you can expect
I'm not sure what the answer to that is then.
Per capita, under a Reform government, Fiona, per capita, you will see welfare spending reduced significantly.
How?
A whole host of reasons. Number one, the highest proportion ever of young people are now on long-term disability and welfare benefits. That's the first thing. And the way you get onto that is, so number one, you actually have a proper assessment and testing process like you used to have before COVID. What happened during COVID, and you can go and look this up online, is the United Kingdom got addicted to welfare at a catastrophic cost. Countries like the United States,
but just to be clear, because I want to bring...
So
I'm not trying to cut across, but just to be clear, because I want to bring more people in, there would be cuts. Fewer people would get welfare if
per capita welfare spending. We are on the side. We're unapologetic about this. We are on the side of people who set their alarm clocks in the morning. Per capita welfare spending will come down under Reform.
OK, so the man in the blue and white, you've got sort of swirls on you. Further back, further back, further back. Keep going, further back with the microphone. Yes, there you are.
Yeah, do I... sorry for the Reform. Do I smell a bit of BS? Because you are trying to tell us to trust you and to trust the Reform, or the Farage show, as we say. You know, it's the same, it's the guy who advocated for Brexit. Let's not forget that. And we forgot something in this conversation. Why the state of the economy is in the mess that we are now. It comes down to one thing. Brexit. Immigration. If we want to talk about immigration, we're supposed to take back control, according to your Farage imposter, you know. So, I mean, you tell us now we need to trust somebody that really advocated for even WTO rules, which he didn't know what WTO rules were. You know, North Korea is in that. But anyway, so we are in the situation because of what happened into the economy. We lost 5% of GDP, around about 150 billion. So the economy will be fantastic with another extra 150 billion. That's why we are where we are.
Let me bring some more people in. Man here in the blue shirt.
It's not where the reform will end up in the comedy club. They are the comedy club. In particular to you, Darren. You said that Labour got in because people wanted change. They didn't. Labour got in because they wanted Labour in charge. And why did they want Labour in charge? Because of what you stand for. I think you need to change the narrative. You took over from the Tories, who destroyed this country in 14 years, and you've given them a window to spout the stuff to do. He's now the Doge lead. Like Elon Musk and Trump, it's a matter of time before him and Farage are going to fall out. What you need to do is change the narrative, not just on what we do. I think the spending review actually makes sense, but the narrative doesn't. The immigration narrative, people in this country genuinely care. But when it comes to a choice between people getting things for free and people really struggling, change the narrative. Put the humanity back in what immigration is all about and sort the immigration stuff out. You all talk the same stuff. There are a handful of things we can change.
I haven't got much time left. Now, look, what I'm finding is a lot of people have been very critical of reform, and that's absolutely your right. I know there are quite a few reform people here in the audience, and obviously they are doing relatively well in the polls. They've just won 10 councils. So I want to just call out again, because otherwise I feel we're not hearing a representative sample of who's good. So, yes, the man there in the black jacket with the white T-shirt. That's me.
Thank you. It's time's gone by. Failure followed by failure. Promises and belief in what you're saying. The gentleman before me was absolutely spot on. We need something different, OK? The policies may not match people's opinions sometimes, but we need a change. It's like the old cliché, the old film, Brewster's Millions. None of the above. That's how it feels like right now. And we need passion. And you know what? We are just Britain right now. We need to be Great Britain again.
And here in the check shirt in the front.
One of the reasons that Reform did so well in the local council elections is because, unlike people in Westminster that make decisions for London and the South East, they actually got boots on the ground and came and listened to the people in the local communities. And I speak from a situation where of knowledge. I used to run the food bank here for 2 years. 30% of the clients now that access the food bank, which is obviously run by Faith in the Community and is a charity, are illegal immigrants. Look at the housing situation in Fleetwood. Large Victorian terraces being bought up by people that are making money, turning them into HMOs and then renting them out to the government in Westminster, who haven't got a blooming clue where Fleetwood is, right? To asylum seekers. What Reform did was they actually came into the town. Nigel Farage himself visited Fleetwood, and his people put boots on the ground, listened to what was being said in the local community, and that's what people appreciated, instead of what seems to be happening everywhere else. It's people in Westminster making decisions for London and the South East.
OK. All right. Look. Let us end with that. I suspect that's a topic we will return to. But for now, our time is up. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to the audience. Really appreciate all your points and your comments. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. Just remember that next week we're doing this special programme devoted to the issues of growing up in the 21st century with an absolutely terrific panel. So if you'd like to be part of that audience, go to the Question Time website. We're in West London, in Greenwood. But otherwise, for tonight, from Fleetwood, bye-bye.
And the political talk continues next on BBC One with more on Labour's spending review and a new deal with Gibraltar in Newscast.